Hello and welcome back. It is now July 7th. It's a beautiful morning out here. We're supposed to have a really hot week with the exception of Wednesday. So you look for a lot of 30-degree temperatures this week, which is probably going to cause a lot of stress. So in this area here around Nobleford, we did get about 1/4 of an inch of rain on Saturday, but didn't amount to a whole lot. Other areas did get quite a bit more, and there was some pretty big thunderstorms to the north and the south of us at points yesterday. So I think rainfall amounts are really going to vary over the weekend from area to area. Right now in this spot here, conditions are pretty dry. You can hardly even tell that there was any rain at all just a couple days ago. Taking a look at bug counts this morning, this field has not been sprayed, and you can see there's almost nothing in it. So overall, cabbage seed pod weevil and lygus numbers have been pretty low. Really, I've only recommended, I think, about 2 or 3 fields be sprayed so far this year. Dryland barley certainly still looking pretty stressed. You can really see those lower leaves are rapidly blasting off. You know, we do have some pretty nice size heads in here. We are actually starting to fill, but we're still pretty short. You can see these heads are even having trouble getting out of the boot. So that's usually a pretty big sign of stress when the heads are filling and they're still partially wrapped up inside that flag leaf. We don't like to see that. So we'll have to keep an eye on what's happening. Well, my small wheat plots are still looking really good this week. I still can't honestly say, when you look down the rows, there really isn't any that are any taller than any of the others. Conditions are looking fairly good. They are all starting to flower. What I am noticing is we did get about 1/4 of an inch of rain in this field on Saturday, but you can see we have relatively minimal stress in that lower canopy from drought conditions in a lot of the treated plots, whereas in kind of the control area and stuff, you can see it does look like we have a little bit more leaf dieback down in the lower canopy. So that's quite interesting to see. Well, the corn is certainly looking good this week. It has grown at least 1 foot to 2 feet in the last week, and it won't be long now, just a couple of weeks, and we're going to be at tassel timing. So things are looking pretty good in here. There is the odd plant here and there that is showing a little bit of the effects of yellow top, which is what you can kind of see right here. And in this case, it's actually relatively minor, and it's just the plant is outgrowing its ability to produce chlorophyll. So usually after a couple of days of weather or a couple days of these leaves being out, they will green up and look perfectly normal. Well, here in this dryland corner of a canola field, we're having a little bit of a breeding swarm of blister beetles. You can see we got a whole pile in here, these guys. So of course these guys do trim flowers and feed on flowers. But I would say that even in this spot, it's not enough to really justify spraying. Typically these breeding swarms really only cover 1 to 2 acres, and it's really hardly worth firing a sprayer up for that. And especially it's overkill to spray an entire field, especially if there's not enough insects otherwise to compensate or to make it worthwhile. Like in this field, there's basically no lygus and almost no cabbage seed pod weevil, so really no reason to spray. I just found a field of what seems to be hemp. This field was just seeded a couple weeks ago, so it looks like it's off to a pretty good start. You can see we got some bigger plants mixed in with some smaller plants here, but overall it looks like a pretty good catch in here. So looks quite interesting. I bet this field is going to stink like crazy once it starts flowering. Well, this field of irrigated oats is looking really good. We are in head emergence now, so heads are just starting to come out now. So things are looking pretty good. They haven't started to flower yet. This field should look dramatically different next week as all of those heads really clear out of the boot and get developing. You will see we do have some leaf disease in here. There's basically some septoria in here, so oats are susceptible to septoria. So we did go in here and spray Miravis Neo just a few days ago before head emergence happened. So hopefully now we will have stopped the progression of the disease for the time being, and we won't see it move any farther. This field should look a lot different next week as more and more of those heads come out and clear the boot. Well, I'm right on the edge of a wheat field, and you can see I got a patch of young burdock here, and you can see it's getting fed on pretty well, and that is all grasshopper damage. There's a couple different species of grasshopper in here, but mostly the 2 stripers is what we're concerned with here. There's not a whole lot of grasshoppers really, just in this patch along the edge of the field here. There's really not a whole lot. I haven't seen anything worth spraying in any of my fields, but I know you don't have to look very far on Twitter to see some pretty bad cases, mostly to the east of us. Well, here along this pivot track, I found a weed that was one that my dad hated more than almost all of the others. So let's see how many of you can identify this weed. Now, it is no longer flowering, so it's going to be a little bit harder to identify by the characteristic flowers, but you can see it does have burrs on it. However, this is not burdock. You can tell the leaves are a little bit fuzzy, and they're a totally different shape compared to burdock. These are like lancelet style shaped leaves. So interesting weed. See how many of you can figure it out. Here on the side of the road, I found one of my most hated weeds. You can see this guy here is a knapweed. I'm pretty sure this one is Russian knapweed. You can see we got some white flowers that are open. Most of the others are in bud. Now, if you don't know much about kochia, imagine a rangeland pasture weed predominantly that has a growth habit somewhat like kochia in that it breaks off, forms a tumbleweed, and spreads seeds every fall. Except unlike kochia, this is a perennial, and it just keeps regrowing and forming patches wherever it grows. And it can be quite difficult to control. So very, very bad weed in pastures. It can knock down your yield in some areas by as much as 70% of your carrying capacity. Well, today I'm checking out this barley field that, as you can see, has a grassy weed problem. So you can see this is an irrigated field. We've got a pretty good stand of barley here, and then here we got a grassy weed. Now, this is quack grass. Now, at a quick glance, you might kind of confuse the seed heads here with Persian darnel. They do look fairly similar, but there's a pretty big difference when you start pulling them up and looking at those creeping rhizomes underneath. Now, this field has a really, really thick patch. This was a hay field relatively recently, and you can see in areas like this that it's pretty much choked out the barley. You can still see some barley down at the bottom, but it's probably, 70% or more of the yield is gone. So when you pull these guys up, can you see the big creeping rhizomes under the ground? So that's how all of this spreads, is with these rhizomes. So that's what makes this so dangerous. When you do any tillage, you can really spread these patches around, which is basically what's happened in this field. These patches have been spread around. So quack grass is a pretty hard grass to control when it is in a crop like this. There's none of our in-crop sprays, no axial, no simplicity, nothing like that is going to get any sort of meaningful control on it because it is a relatively deep-rooted perennial grass. So the only thing we can really do is hit it with things like glyphosate. So, and of course, we can't do that in crops. So I think what we're going to do with this field is we're going to silage this one off. This producer does have the ability to do silaging. And then we're going to let that quack grass regrow a little bit, and then we're going to spray her all out with glyphosate and probably seed some oats or something in here as a fall crop for grazing. Well, keep an eye out on your wheat fields. Today I did find a little bit of rust. I'm up in the picture butte area. There's a little bit of rust I am finding here, a little bit of stripe rust here and here on the leaf. So it's easily identifiable by kind of raised orange pustules that you can kind of rub off with your finger if you're not very careful. I did not find a whole lot, just a couple leaves here and there, but it is worth keeping an eye on. This disease, if conditions are good for it to spread, it can spread through a crop pretty rapidly. Well, there's quite a few fields out there where we do have some bacterial streaks starting to show up. So it's a relatively common disease to see in both wheat and barley, and it is primarily from infected seed. Once that plant starts to grow, it's already infected. There's nothing you can do about it. And irrigation water or rain splashing tends to spread it from leaf to leaf. So usually, if conditions are just right on the underside of the leaf, you will have kind of like a bacterial ooze that can be crystally. But more often than not, conditions are not perfect for that, and you don't see it if it's just been washed off or something along those lines. Well, so far where we've reseeded oats on rye stubble, we've got very good catch. Everything is looking pretty good. Most of this is hitting 2-leaf stage now and looking pretty good. As long as we can keep the water on it in these hot, dry conditions, it doesn't take too long for that upper 6 inches where that root zone is right now to get depleted of moisture. So things are looking pretty good. I am getting a little bit nervous about barley yellow dwarf disease. You know, these recent storms and the wind like today that is coming out of the southwest is what tends to bring those infected aphids up across the border from the US. So there is the potential that we do now have barley yellow dwarf virus, which could even now be in these oats. However, visual symptoms do not generally show up for a minimum of 2 weeks after infection. So we just will not know for now. As of now, I'm not seeing any symptoms at all. Well, the dryland lentils down by McGrath are looking really good. We did get off to a little bit of a rocky start in this field just due to straw volume left over from last year, but now they have filled in and bushed out and they are looking very good. So we are still flowering really well, setting lots of pods in here. Now, we did spray a fungicide in here when flowering started, and I'm not really seeing any sign of disease really yet on the pods, but at this time of the year, we got to start watching out for things like anthracnose and stuff like that. So we will be monitoring as needed in the next couple of weeks, and hopefully we won't need to do a second application. Well, finished sweeping my canola fields just in time for some pretty good clouds coming in from the northwest, dropping quite a bit of rain in places here. Well, Thursday's rainstorm ended up being quite violent at times, but really only amounted to about 1/4 of an inch here by Nobleford. So this canola field behind me did get a few of its blooms knocked off during the violence of the rain, but otherwise it is perfectly fine, and we're probably going to see a lot more flowers coming out today and tomorrow yet. So that's where we will leave things for the week, and we'll see you next time.